Just in case you missed it, it's the top 5 sports talkers of the day. Now, it's time for Dan Barrero's Top 5 at 5. Brought to you by Gutter Helmet of Minnesota. Never clean your gutters again. Learn more at gutterhelmetmn.com.
We have already lots of good hockey emails coming in via the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line for our in-studio guest, Luigi, brought to you by our good friends at Kemp's. And there'll be plenty of time to get into all of that. We're going to do a mini Top 5 at 5 with Gaardsy. What do you have on tap for us?
Because we're a little behind schedule, let's just give you the keyword right now. The 5 o'clock National Cash Contest keyword, thanks to 2 men and a junk truck. And the final keyword of the evening is Bills. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword Bills. No, Luigi, I don't think you're eligible to win the $1,000. I don't think you're eligible.
Because I know the Hawaii Bills are coming in.
Yeah,
you could use it, right?
Let's just keep it quick and talk Vikings for sure.
Yes.
We mentioned that the Wolves beat Charlotte last night as they were supposed to. I like how Chris Finch actually stepped up and called out Jaden McDaniels last night. I don't know if you saw that, and basically said his defense has not been good. Jaden has not had a good start to the season.
No.
But they did knock off the Hornets last night here at Target Center. The Vikings, as Kevin Seifert writes and talked about an hour ago, are placing 2/3 of their specialists on some type of injured reserve. As John Parker Romo is back, he's a kicker. Long snapper Jake McQuaid is here for the first time because Will Reichert sustained that right quad injury last week and is out for a minute. And Andrew DiPaolo is scheduled to have surgery to repair a right hand. They will each miss at least the next 4 games. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting because we've had, obviously, until this last game, very good place kicking. You're entering a mode of the schedule where you say, well, will you really even need a kicker if you take care of business because you're playing inferior teams? And the answer is, yeah, you still might. That's what's weird. I mean, you can go on the road and struggle more than you should, for example, against Jacksonville and say, we might need somebody to hit a 48-yard field goal to save us, right? So the timing is not great, but as Seifert points out, there's a bunch of kickers who've gotten hurt this year. I don't know if there's, any particular reason that this is happening. Is it coincidence or not? But we finally think we find our kicker, and in this case, yeah, he didn't look great this last game, but he wasn't going to make every kick all year, and it may have been in part because of injury. You find yourself in a position where you look around and you do the best you can, and this is a kicker who, as you said, was with the team in training camp, has never kicked in an NFL regular season game, had a good run with the XFL, where I think he missed only 2 kicks. I don't know what kind of range he has. But what you're looking for now, obviously, is just a guy who can, make the kicks that you're supposed to make. Right, Luigi?
Well, he's been something. It's too bad that he got hurt, even though he missed a couple. The Vikings have to feel good about that position right now.
Well, they exactly right, because there's every reason to believe. I know people are freaky. They don't ever want to hear us say we found our kicker, because then we say, well, as soon as we do that, that's when he starts screwing up. I think this guy, there's every reason to believe he's going to be the kicker for a while. The only dream I had was, could you go and get the Raiders kicker that we cut, right?
Yeah.
Gaardsy, what's his name?
Daniel Carlson.
Yeah, Carlson. Yeah. Could we have gotten him back? How brilliant would that have been?
I think we could have gotten his brother, right? Did his brother ever land anywhere? Because he was the Packer kicker, and they got bitter with him.
Yeah, I don't think he's quite as good as Daniel. I think Daniel's still very good.
Daniel's pretty good.
But he's wasted with the Raiders, right? They're meaningless. They just fired a bunch of coaches. They can't win.
That would have been unbelievable.
That'd be a hell of a story, but apparently that ship has sailed.
All right, let's stay on schedule. We'll talk Wild with Luigi for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe Joel Embiid, because he was officially suspended 3 games for that altercation. Luigi was asking me about it on the Embiid thing. 3 games for the altercation with the reporter.
Well, in fact, that's one of the subjects we'll get into, because Luigi was infamous, one could say, for getting in shoving matches with reporters pretty much all the time. There's constant physical battles with the reporters.
I don't think so.
Well, no, probably not. Maybe a couple verbal ones.
Many
verbal ones, including a couple with me, but never anything that I recall being particularly physical. Luigi in studio for the hour. Stay tuned.
Well, she sneaks around the world from India to Carolina. She's a sticky-fingered filcher from Berlin down to Belize. She'll take you for a ride on a slow boat to China. Tell me, where in the world is
Lou Nanne?
He's here. He's been here for quite a while, actually, including a truncated edition of the Top 5 at 5 because we went a little long talking Quincy Jones with Jimmy Jam. If you have questions for Louie, and some of you have already passed them along to us, Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is 64686. Here's a toss-up one that you might not have been expecting, Louie. This is from Adam out of Duluth, Minnesota. Question for the king of hockey. Would he be opposed to moving the start of the hockey season to Jan 1, which would result in the playoff run ending roughly Labor Day week, preventing the total crossover with the NBA and breaking into the MLB Dog Days monopoly? I have heard this idea pitched, and I thought it was rather interesting. What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to starting January 1st, but I'd want them to end in May, not in September. Actually, I we've all said for a long time, all the sports seasons are too long.
Yeah, they are. There's no question.
You want to generate the revenue, that's it. And that's the name of the game. If it wasn't for that, I would definitely think that, of course, you'd have less injuries, you got less games, but you would have a better product because guys are fresher and in better condition and not playing as many games. You're getting more rest in between games, which many times leads to injuries.
By the way, today's election day, but we all know you voted like 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I did.
So when you vote on election day, you can get they hand it to you. I refused to accept it, although I wasn't even asked if I wanted it today, and I voted sticker. So when you vote early, is that called absentee?
Yeah, because I vote in Florida.
Yeah. So do they offer you do you have a I voted absentee sticker? Because I think I've seen those exist too.
Well, they didn't.
Do you feel compelled?
They didn't send it through the mail.
You didn't get it. Okay.
No.
So do you feel compelled to tell people that you voted? Are you comfortable in not having to necessarily trumpet that with a sticker?
No, I feel very good about that. And if anybody wins, I'm moving to Italy.
Well, that's probably a good idea regardless. I was going to say, yeah.
When you listen to all these media, no matter who wins, they're moving here, they're moving there.
And they never go.
So I'm just going to go to Italy then.
They never go.
If somebody wins.
Yeah, there is a lot of that, especially in the, I think in the movie world, actors are become infamous for saying exactly that. Okay, I'm glad we got that out of the way. So you got the hottest team in hockey. They complete a very successful road trip. Everybody told me that, well, you can't win the first game at home because history says it's a tough game to play after you've been on the road a long time. There's a natural letdown, blah, blah, blah. And they had some vulnerabilities in that game, but they won it. And the theory I want to run by you is that if you go back to the Pittsburgh game at the end of the road trip and the first game here, that those are examples of games that in other years the Wild would have been far more likely to find a way to lose rather than find a way to win. Do you agree with that sentiment, or is that overplaying this very good start early?
Well, I think it was overplayed, but that would be overplayed. But what was most surprising to me is something that people aren't going to focus on because they're not in that situation. They were 12 days on the road, and that's really tough, right, to be on the road and you might practice, you might play a game, but it's really tough to maintain focus, to play as well as they played, and come back, and as you're saying, then come back, and then first part of that game, they might be a little sluggish, but they got right back into it to win it. But the fact that they were able to do that has to be, right now, for them, the most important thing that's happened besides having Gustafsson play the way he's played. And I'm saying that because now they really have a great deal of confidence in their ability to go up against anybody in any situation and win games. And they've got through the toughest road trip game situation they're going to have in the year. So here you're sitting there, you play 11 games, you got 18 points, and you've been through the toughest type of road trip you're going to have all year long. Has to make you feel good. You know you're going to lose some games, but you don't know just when. Beyond
the goaltending and Kaprizov, what stands out to you that has contributed to this start, and what is, in your view, what about it can be realistically sustained? What about it do you say, well, I still got to see if it can be sustained?
Well, I think that the thing that I like the most is the balance of scoring, which is now even spreading out further because you got Foligno and Hartman playing together with Gaudreau, and they've bounced back. Hartman had a good season last year, regardless of what anybody says. He still got about 25 goals or so. But the other two guys have bounced back, and they're starting to score. You got a little scoring out of the fourth line, plus you're having great checking from the third and fourth lines. But then you got the second line with Boldy's. He's off to a great start. Johansson's playing better than he was. Exal was good. And then you got the first line with Kaprizov going. So the balance up front is tremendous. The balance in the back end has been good. And Spurgeon did miss a lot. He played the last 3 games, but the balance on defense, it's not overly deep, but it's deep enough because you still got, some pretty solid players back there. And your goaltending's good. So that's the best thing. Now, what has to be sustained? Of course, it's going to be Gustafson's goaltending because that was a key to starting off the losing last year because he wasn't nearly as good, and neither was Fleury. And so you started with soft goaltending. But Fleury's been good when he hasn't played much, and when he plays, he looks sharp. So you got balance in goaltending. You got Gus playing terrific, and the team playing like that. So can the goaltending sustain that? And can we stay away from injuries? Because we're not going to be deep enough to pull somebody up to make a big difference or lessen the difference from the people going out.
How is the coaching different? How does that play out on the ice where you say, okay, here's where I think this coach's influence is having them do A, B, and C as opposed to when they were maybe doing D, E, and F?
Well, you have to remember with D, E, and F, with Dean before, they've had some great success.
They have,
he had 9-point season or something. They had success there. So I don't think it's different. It's just that they've got the message from Hines the way he wants them to play, and they're playing that style. And when you're playing good, you're doing the right things. They talk about their gap control, meaning there's no room between the defense and forwards to really get coming with speed and moving the puck a lot. Their overall checking game is better. Their special teams is better both places than they were before. So all the facets of the game are sharper than they were when they started last year with that disastrous start. But afterwards, the rest of the year, they had a real good record the rest of the year after Hines started coaching. And you have to say that they're just continuing the kind of hockey that they were playing when they were playing well last year for them, and they're playing it more consistently.
They talk a lot. Guerin talks a lot about details, and that can be kind of difficult to pin down because everybody says details are vital for any team. It's kind of what those details are. And some of that, I think, seems to be what you were talking about. And also, I do think, and I think, touched upon this in previous conversations, relatively fewer penalties, where you're not putting yourself, especially if you do not have, and they didn't a year ago, have a very good penalty kill, automatically put yourself at a disadvantage when you're already a team that doesn't have much margin for error.
Well, it's details and discipline. I think that's something that they've really focused on for the whole season right now. Doing your job. The best statement you could say is, whatever your job is, you do your job, but then they take care of the details and they do it with discipline. And little things, like if someone, a defenseman breaks his stick, say, in front of the net, the forward that's the same shooting hand should be giving them a stick, and they're doing that kind of thing. Their changes are better when they're coming on and going off the ice, not getting caught where sometimes you change lackadaisically and you're going to the bench, they're coming with the ice, and you get outnumbered situations for the opponent who got you in your zone. They score goals. All the little details, picking up the right man, not any man, just the right man. Because there's, when you start getting in your defensive zone, there's people that are more dangerous than others, and they got to be covered more than the other guy, and like if you're in a 2-1 situation, they're coming down 2-1 on the defenseman. The defenseman's playing it properly, so he keeps the one guy the puck here at an angle, and he's in position to block the pass going across, so the goalie only has to face that guy with an angle shot rather than a head on from 10 feet in front. They're doing all those kind of things consistently, and they're doing it more than they did it before, and that's what contributes to their winning.
Let's get back on schedule. Make this the bottom of the hour pause. A good half-hour segment yet to come with Luigi. Keep the questions coming. We'll also find out when we come back the closest that Louis ever came to shoving a reporter. He says he never did it. What's the closest he ever came to physical confrontation? It's in the news because Joel Embiid, the Philadelphia 76ers superstar, has been suspended 3 games for allegedly, shoving an ink-stained wretch for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Stay tuned.
MMA fans, it's time. You can join Max Fuller and Robbie Rosenhaus November 16th for a UFC 309 watch party at the Ballpark Twin Cities in Blaine. Hanging out starting at 7 through the main card with tons of prizes, including a big screen TV up for grabs. Great drinks, scratch-made food, and batting cages all available. Full details, KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Louis is back with us in studio, brought to you by our good friends at Kemp's. We'll be with you till, Gaardsy tells me, 6:15 today. 6:15. We got some Vikings programming to get to. And then I call them the hottest team in hockey, but there's some bitterness about that because I guess technically Winnipeg's the hottest team in hockey. And I was not being that serious, but you know how it is. It's the world of you got to be literal or people lose their minds, especially during this election season, Louis. Closest you ever came to a physical altercation with a reporter or broadcaster?
I really didn't have any physical altercation with them. I had one reporter that I had thrown out of the building.
You did?
Yes.
Who was it?
I'm not going to say his name.
Oh, come on. It's a statute of limitations.
No, he lives here. Well, it's just the fact that he broadcasted, well, my team is in the locker room.
Yeah.
And they had the TV on, and that I was going to trade Don Beaupre was being traded that night.
Right.
And I hadn't even engaged in any talks for trading Beaupre, but it was a big game for us, and now he's got my goaltender listening to he's getting traded after the game.
Was it Rosen?
I'm not saying.
Oh, okay. Right.
I'll tell you, it's every
Joe
one
Schmidt?
of them, every one of those guys you named. That's who it was.
It won't matter. Yeah, all right.
And so I just.
So how did you do? So did you like confront him and say, "Get out of here"?
Yeah, I did.
You're out of here.
And I said, I'm getting security escort you out if you don't leave. Of course, I heard about it the next day from the station, but that I just.
So you didn't shove him. You just said, "Get out."
No, the only time I ever got in it.
That's pretty juicy.
Was when I was general manager for Team USA in Italy in 1993.
Have you told this story before? It sounds like you might have.
I don't know.
No, well, go ahead.
I don't think so.
Maybe not. Okay, good.
We had a very good tournament, and we were going into the game before, which would get us into the playoff, and we had to beat Finland to get in the game, and if we didn't beat Finland, Sweden was in.
Okay.
And in the first 4 minutes of the game, we have a Swedish referee, and he gives us 3 penalties, and we're down 3-0, and now I'm not too happy.
You're fairly livid, would you say?
Fairly livid. Yeah, I was not very happy. And then he gave us another one to put us down 4-0. We came back quite a ways. Then he gave one more, and we lost the game. So I was unhappy enough to go down and wait for him coming off the ice. But I hid my badge, so he didn't know who I was. And that way, if he could do whatever he wants, and so I was berating him all the way to the locker room door, and he finally shoved me, and that was
shoved me
first. So,
really? Yeah. Oh,
so I
you responded?
Engaged.
You engaged? Any punches thrown?
No, I just threw him down. And I jumped on an Ubriaco. Gene, who used to coach for me, was coaching Italy in the tournament, and he's coming down to see me, and Louis, and then I says. And I was holding the guy there, and then their linesman came out to get me off, and I said, "Ubi, you saw him push me first, so you're my
witness."
You're my witness.
Yeah.
And so the next day, of course, they had a hearing, and I gave my side of it. He gave his side of it, and he wasn't going to ever referee again in the World Tournament, and they fined me $10,000.
Oh, that's a lot of money for them.
And suspended me for a year of international.
Is that right? I don't remember this.
And I told him, I said, well, you can forget the $10,000 and you could suspend me for life because I'm not coming back. So I somehow it got resolved.
You got out of it.
Not
So
by
you,
me.
you didn't have to write the check for $10,000?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. Did anybody? You think you got out of it?
Somebody must have.
Yeah.
And but I don't know who. I don't know how.
So,
And the funniest part, I have to tell you this. So the funniest part was 2 years later that we're in Prague, and I was getting put into the International Ice Hockey Federation. And Saylor was there with the Canadian team, who he was there with 2 years before that. And he said, the last time I was here, you were getting suspended for a year, fined $10,000, and now they put you in the International Ice Hockey Hall of Fame. I said, maybe it was for escaping.
maybe that's what it is. By the way, somebody's done some sleuthing. Gaardsy does this a lot. He claims to have, not Gaardsy, but our texter claims to have found a Star Tribune headline from 2017. Lou Nanne suppressed many an urge to slap a sports reporter. I don't remember that story. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember it. I can't believe that's
Well, that
true.
doesn't mean you did it. It just means you might have had it in your mind.
I don't.
Could have been the wrong headline, too, that was maybe clickbait.
They must have been talking about Sonmore, not me. Glenn.
Oh, that could. Yeah, that would be more likely,
That was
wouldn't
more
it?
likely, yeah.
That sounds like Sonmore. Yeah.
No,
Well, you understood the business.
Yeah.
I always said that about you. You know, it doesn't mean you always loved what you read and disagreed with it, but it was always you'd have it out with whoever, and then it was you move on and you just move on. And to me, that's always been your secret, because I think for a lot of people in your business, it's hard to move on, and it festers, and then it ends up being a point of tension, and you don't get past it, and that's where it can get destructive, I think. Don't you agree?
I agree, but you know what the amazing thing is? I never really got upset at what they were writing about our team or me.
Yeah.
The only time I really get upset with the writers, and I did call them on many occasions right around the country, was when they were saying my coach is going to get fired.
Right. And you're saying, wait a minute.
And I'm saying, I said, do you understand you're playing with somebody's livelihood?
Yeah, right.
You know, whether I'm going to fire him or not, I'm not going to tell anybody, and I'm not going to say I considered it or not. But the fact that you instigated that kind of talk, you really initiated it right around the country. Now people that are fans,
They're assuming it's true.
They're assuming it's true, or they're getting on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
They're making him be under more pressure. And it's, I agree that you can speculate on how a team's doing.
Right.
I just don't think that it's proper to and speculate on the guy being fired, how he's coaching or something. Because I said, you don't get that kind of treatment. You're writing an article. Nobody's saying, and there's no way that we can get together as a group of athletes or teams and come and say this guy should be fired for kind of writing he's doing.
My recollection, going back to my Inkstein-Retsch experiences with you, and even with sports editors I worked with, was the thing that I remember you used to get angriest about wasn't necessarily the accuracy of a story or even an opinion expressed. It was story placement. You would lose your mind over a belief that you weren't getting proper play compared to some other sports. That, to me, was that's at least in my mind's eye, that's what I remember being a really big axe to grind for you. Am I right?
That really was more than you know. In fact, the Lynx are going through that this year. You know, Cheryl Reeves even talked about that.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, one time and I might have told you years ago, I brought back about 10 newspapers from Montreal.
Yes.
And I went up to the editor at the Minneapolis Star and Tribune and says, we came back, we just beat Montreal. We're on the 5th page. And I just want you to see what how they're covering their team. And you know, they have 6, 7, 8, 9 pages.
Right.
And yes, I used to call the paper
I
all
remember
the time.
that, yeah.
And that's why I didn't even get upset. Like Charlie Hallman, who wrote for St. Paul Pioneer Press, and I really, I like Charlie. I used to like all the writers. You do your job.
You got along.
Talk what you want.
Yeah.
I'll say what I say. You do what you want. But one time he wrote a story in July, which was completely fabricated. Like he talked to me and he made up this whole story about who I was talking trade with that week, who was going to be gone, blah, blah, blah. And I was in Canada on vacation.
Yeah.
And And my assistant had the story, and she said, maybe you want to know what's in the paper here. So when I came back, I called Charlie, and I said...
By the way, this is not Charles Hallman. You're talking about Charlie Hallman. These are all the issues that have come up before. Like these are two very different individuals, but go ahead.
And I said, come on, we have to have lunch.
Your Charlie Hallman's not with us anymore. I think he's passed away a while ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And I asked him, come on, I'm going to meet you for lunch. And so I meet him for lunch. What's the problem? I says, Charlie, you got to understand. You can't say that you just talked to me and I said that. And he said, well, I tried to get you, but we didn't have cell phones. And he said, I couldn't get in touch with you. And I knew you would say this if I talked to you. So I thought I wrote it. I said, no, you can't do that.
No. And he would.
And he would. He made up a lot of stories.
Yes, he had quite a reputation.
And so those kind of things.
Well, yeah, you had a right to be mad about that.
But I said, I'm not as mad as you think because it's July. And we do need ink in the paper to sell tickets. We're fighting the Vikings and the Twins. Yeah. I said, so anytime you want to write about us in the paper, I don't mind, but please just be accurate. Don't fabricate stories that you've talked to me. If you want to say that this is what you think, that's fine. But don't say you talked to me and this is what I said.
So let me ask you one other media question. Then I want to get back to some wild stuff and some broader NHL stuff in our remaining time. There are people who believe that may not have mattered in this case, whether their, players or media had access to a locker room or not. The theory has been advanced that in a perfect world, reporters would not be in locker rooms at all, that there would be separate media rooms that players after games would be brought to upon request by media relations people. And you wouldn't have this tension that is part of right after the game. Sometimes locker rooms are getting bigger than they used to be. They used to be very small. It's a mess. It's hot or it's cold or it's, there's in case of football, athletic tape all over the place. And that it's an unnatural meeting point between two groups that have very different ideas of what their jobs are, obviously players and athletes. Do you agree with that, or do you? Because the media come back to that as well. But if you do that, there's too much emotion. You're not getting the true emotion of what a player is feeling after a game, and that's sort of part of what you're trying to convey when you're passing along your stories to the fans, to the audience. What do you think?
I like the fact that the reporters would come in right after the game.
You did?
There, I did.
Interesting.
I liked it both as a player then as a manager. I think for the fans, that's the most important thing that happens because just what you were talking about. You get the emotion of the game. You get the players raw. You get the best reactions. And I think even though there could be tension, I think if you had that still going on, you'd have a better relationship, a closer relationship between the writers and the players. And because you have that, you'd have better coverage, better stories. Not that you're not getting good coverage now, but I don't think you get the same kind of coverage that you had as we had in those days when, reporter and players yelling at each other. But do you ever remember that most of the guys, after it's over, just what you're talking about, the next day the player would forget about it and the guy would forget about it, and you wouldn't have the same kind of friction that you think you're getting if the player got to know the writer better, and the writer got to know the player better. Well, I like that better.
Well, I tell you, it's a very sophisticated observation that sadly I'm not sure all that many current general managers or presidents of hockey operations. I think most of them would say no, we don't need any of that. Yeah. That's too emotional. We want to get them out of there. I think what you're saying, it's refreshing to hear from you, someone who was a general manager and was a player, but I don't think it's shared by very many people in your business.
No, I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure 99% of them wouldn't like that. But I'm just telling you as a fan, if I could get that kind of emotion that they're feeling between each other and the kind of rawness that the players have right after a game and what comes up, it would make for more interesting reading is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I think it's a great coverage. I think it's a great point.
Now, it's like anything. I don't care what situation you're in. You have to learn to, after the situation is over, to handle it properly and forget about it. I used to tell the players, 20 guys in here. I don't expect you to love each other all the time.
Right.
I said, you get married and you have a wife, you're not going to go through your whole life without a disagreement or an argument. Does that mean you don't love her? No. But you have to sometimes, state your opinion. She's got to state her opinion, and same thing in the locker room. But once a game starts, you're a team. You stick up for one another. You die for one another, the whole deal. But the opportunity to see players, how they feel right after a game, and the emotion that they have, if that can be conveyed to fans, it'd give them a real good idea about what those players are going through, what it means to the game for them, and how they handle it. Are these shows that they're doing on TV so powerful? Those, whatever they call them on HBO,
streaming series,
yes. Yeah. And it's showing the players in a raw moment.
Absolutely.
And why, remember the NFL films when they first came out? You had a lot of this. You don't get that anymore. And I used to love watching it, and I think the fans would love that.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Well, part of what's happened, too, at least in some sports, is the local beat reporter that used to be pretty key. Like, it had value, and teams cared, and players had to sort of deal with those individuals. In a lot of cases, it doesn't exist anymore because certainly to a certain extent in basketball, for example, it's the national reporters. That's all they watch. They may not even be aware that there's people covering them locally. Now, there's some exceptions. Obviously, John Krasinski is a good one here, and there's several others. But I think also you feel like the walls are much taller between these athletes who have their own brands and they have their own agents who say, well, we'll make decisions of who you talk to and how often you talk to them and so forth. And it's made those walls, it'd be actually more helpful if those could be broken down. There's too much between, I think, in many cases. Part of the reason a lot of news stories, sports stories are broken nationally now more than they are locally. Same reason.
That's right, because the player isn't getting humanized.
Yes.
They're not getting humanized at all. If these guys had the opportunity to work with the players closely every day at all times, then the players learn to trust them. They learn they have a job to do like the player has a job to do. If the reporter's doing a bad job, the players let them know about it. But the relationship that gets built is a lot better than right now, the way the situation is handled, I think is really cold and indifferent.
I agree.
And just matter of fact. And, standard questions, the same thing that you never get to know the athlete today like you did in the past.
To this point, if we broaden out the discussion beyond the Wild, I think we mentioned we're at the 15% mark of the season. So we're moving along, but we're not too far along. Everybody's trying to figure out, okay, what's real and what's kind of like it's fleeting. It's too early to draw any grand conclusions. What for you is the biggest surprise beyond the Wild in the to the start of the National Hockey League season?
Winnipeg Jets. I didn't even think, I thought they were going to have to battle badly for a playoff position. And then they and the Wild have to be the two biggest surprises in the league. And the good part about that for those teams, when you sit there and, Winnipeg's got 22 points and Wild got 18, that's a lot of points in the amount of games they play.
That's right.
That makes up for slumps that could come their way, and really, it actually prevents you from getting in long slumps, I think, because you have so much belief right now that it's hard to break that belief unless you go into a tragic, 10-game losing streak or something, which I don't see happening the way they're playing right now. So, you obviously you can't make the playoffs the first month of the season, but you sure can miss them. Well, that happened to the Wild last year.
100%.
And so now this year, they're basically making the playoffs right now. It's going to be hard for them to miss the playoffs. They're going to have either real serious injuries, very bad goaltending, or I can't see any way that they completely fall apart from the way they're playing with the kind of confidence they got and miss the playoffs.
It's further proof that even though you can't win a playoff series in October or November, obviously, you really can put yourself in position where, as you say, it's going to be hard, barring a collapse, to miss. Just like the opposite, which is if you get behind the 8 ball to the degree they did, you may be almost doomed unless you're a super team that can just literally turn it on. That's the value of getting off to a good start. That's what it represents, and we're seeing it right in front of us.
And I think more than that, we're seeing something without really realizing it. And that's the fact that this Wild team has got to be building the kind of confidence right now where they could go into the playoffs and not expect that it's going to be tough to get through the first round, and know that they're going to get through the first round. This team is starting to build a kind of belief that you want to have as a team throughout the season and going into the playoffs. Before the season started, would you say, well, they're really got a good chance of being in the second round?
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't have this year.
No.
After coming off what they did.
No question.
Right now, would you say that? It's absolutely. I look around the league right now and I say, who scares them? Which team scares them? And really, there isn't anybody really scares them. But right now, the teams, if you start saying who's a cut above, and it's the Jets, it's Florida Panthers, might be New York Rangers, and the Wild. Those are four teams, and Dallas is supposed to be so good, and all of a sudden, they got slapped a couple times overseas. They're not starting the way they can, and Vegas is pretty good. So when you're looking at that, you're saying this team, if it stays together, they got a chance to do something pretty significant.
We'll finish with a text. This is interesting. There's no name here, but she writes, is 612. I was a female reporter in 1980. Louis took me into the locker room. Could not have been nicer, more respectful. I was a kid college student. I knew hockey, and my questions to him proved it outside. I was nervous, but got good sound bites, and he escorted me around. I never forgot his kindness. Still love listening to him today. Thanks, Louis. Loving the Wild these days and having Flower. I live between here and Nevada. See, you never realize at the time the influence you can have. A gesture from a long time ago, and here she is. What are we talking about? This is 40 years later, for God's sake, and she still remembers it. Right?
Well,
that's the
just
lesson.
One thing is just respect the other person's job.
That's it.
I think
which you always have.
Yeah, because we all have different
male
jobs.
or female.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. We all try and do our jobs, whatever it is, and you want to be respectful of how they're doing their job, and hope that they're respectful of how you're doing yours. That's all you can do.
Well, part of it, I think, that for the reason you were is, but hell, you were doing media work when you were like 12,
yeah.
right? So I mean, you were like you had a foot in each world for so long. Player, you're doing your own shows. We've played some of the tapes of you, some of your interviews, including with Muhammad Ali. So that did probably give you a unique perspective, because you're right. You had some sensibility and sensitivity to people doing that job, even though you were a player and then a general manager.
Dan, you don't know how right you are, because I can remember two situations. One concerning Reggie Jackson playing here against Oakland A's, and another Dr. J that I talked about in Philadelphia. When I went to talk to them, first of all, before I got to talk to them, the PR guys go, "No, you can't go." I said, "Look, I play with the North Stars, but I also have a radio show on WLOL." Oh, okay, fine. They take me over. And both the athlete and the PR guy respected the fact that I was playing, and they treated me differently than they might have treated others.
No question. Yeah.
And I thought to myself, boy, it's a good thing I'm doing this. I wouldn't even get this opportunity, which I think would have been wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And so you get that kind of thought process going. You're figuring, I got a leg up, but the people that don't shouldn't be restricted in doing what I'm doing.
Great talk as always. Will we see you next week, or because it's starting to get cold?
No,
I assume you're heading, to Florida pretty soon.
I got to go to San Diego first.
Oh, San Diego. Wow. Okay.
But no, I'll be gone. I'm probably gone for a long time now.
Okay. But we will get you on the phone.
Yeah.
Even better. Good to see you, Luigi. Great stuff. As always, we'll chat next week.
Thanks, buddy.
One more segment today. We'll come back with some election thoughts, a couple of texts, and prepare you for what we might have in mind regarding that issue on tomorrow's broadcast.
Show Wrap is brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the Bumper to Bumper Show Wrap.
right, final segment today. We got some Vikings programming to get to, and then your Red Hot Minnesota Wild. Great conversation with Luigi. Also today, well, if it interests you, I mean, you care about the Minnesota Vikings, a good hour, close to an hour, with Kevin Seifert on our place-kicking moves, our long snapper moves, another look back at our victory over the Colts, and a couple of other National Football League issues. And then at, about 4:30-ish, a little after that, we had a good chat with our old friend Jimmy Jam on the news, really the day after, because we owed it him yesterday. Quincy Jones, the heavyweight music producer, died yesterday. It was announced at age 91. And Jimmy was outstanding. Obviously, also is a great record producer who got to know him a little bit, what he learned from him, the musical legacy. He's always such a good guest on music stuff. And it was sad in a way because he was reminding us that he's reached a point in his life where he's attending funerals and he's going, wait a minute, hold on a second now. These aren't just quote-unquote old people. These are people closer in age to me now that reality starts setting in the older you get. And he is such a great bridge for us, musically speaking, in I think to a certain extent learning about what we otherwise might not know about a record producer as well known as Quincy Jones, but who we obviously don't have any personal experience with. So that was between about 4:35. We went a little long.
Yep.
We went actually into the 5 o'clock hour.
Best line I've heard in forever, though. When he said, you described us as musical legends, talking about Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. He said,
highly decorated.
Highly decorated.
Yes.
He said, we have 5 Grammys. He said, Quincy has 28.
I think Quincy's been nominated for like 62. Something like that.
I love that.
So,
You said we're decorated. We have 5.
Yeah.
This guy had 28.
At 28 and did. And again, it had to be as good a musical partnership in terms of exalted status as has ever existed. Quincy Jones and Frank Sinatra. And Sinatra at the Sands is, for my money, the best live album ever done in popular music. You don't even have to love the genre like I do to appreciate how well crafted, well produced, well sung that it's like a time capsule to a different time, but effortless phrasing of Sinatra. Great work of the outstanding world-class Count Basie band, and Quincy Jones basically in charge of all of it, which was outstanding. And we did try to set the record straight. It's not Quincy Lewis. I had some reason today Quincy Lewis on the brain, and that's very different. I mean, a nice player to help the Gophers get to the Final Four.
First-round draft pick,
an
NBA.
Extremely versatile college player. He's kind of like that Swiss Army knife player, right? You could play him front court, you could play him back court, you mix and match, wing guy.
Great player off the bench for the Final Four team.
Very good.
Charles Thomas.
That's very, very true, Davey. Tomorrow, well, by the way, Vikings country tonight, right after us, and then Wild Kings at 6:45 in the Fan. Tomorrow is a Mace Day. Tomorrow is also a Kessler Day, and it's the Kesslerist day of all Kessler days. It's the day after a presidential election. Will we know by the time he comes on at 5:15 or 5:30 who the next president of the United States is going to be? I say no, but I don't think it's going to take as long as it did 4 years ago.
Right.
And I thought, didn't that take till Friday?
It was like Friday, yeah. It was
I
late.
don't think it's going to take till Friday this year. That's my prediction. I'm not predicting a winner. A week ago, I think I said Trump. I feel less certain of that today, and I don't even know why. Do you? And all these big shot pollsters, they go, well, we ran 5 million, what do you call it? Progressions or simulations.
Yeah.
And Harris won by 1 of the 5 million. In other words, we have no idea any more than you have any idea. Are there any early clues that have been passed along that you've noticed today while we've been doing a show?
I'll be honest, because of all of that, the uncertainty, I have largely stayed out of it. I have not been tracking it at all. all day. Even now, I'm kind of looking, but not really.
That's fair.
A couple of states have kind of already been called, the easy ones, but I have not been paying attention to it.
I don't think there's going to be an upset here. But we'll break it all down tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the day after that. We'll talk to you at 3.